let's go to Assange now. I really want to get here. I wanted to show you this headline. So this is from the BBC. UN criticizes Trump's pardons for Blackwater guards jailed over Iraq killings. So these are the people Trump is pardoning. He's pardoning war criminals. He's pardoning his friends, Papadopoulos and whoever else. He's not pardoning Snowden. He's not pardoning Assange. And here's another thing that I wanted to show you, another headline I wanted to show you before we talk about all this and dive into what to expect January 4th. Here is something from a torture reporter out in Sweden, Niels Messer. If President Trump is true to his declared values of fighting government corruption and misconduct, he should pardon Assange, who defends precisely these values and has suffered enough for the interests of the public around the world. Now, this is a guy over in Sweden who reports on torture.
So he's actually Swiss, and he's the UN Special Rapporteur on torture and human rights abuses.
Okay. Oh, he's Swiss. I apologize. All right. I said Sweden. My bad.
He speaks fluent Swedish.
Oh, really? There we go. Maybe that's why I was confused. No, I just misspoke. But yeah, so this guy, and he's an academic, he's a professor, and he reports, which, by the way, again, for anybody who doesn't realize this, we'll repeat it again. Solitary confinement is torture. Solitary confinement is torture. And this guy's reporting on it. He's calling for a pardon of Assange. And in the U.S. media, the only thing they're talking about is that Julian Assange's partner wants him pardoned. They're not going to tell you this stuff. They're not going to tell you that experts in this field are saying you got to pardon this guy. They won't talk about that. The U.S. media will not talk about that. So let me ask you about a couple things. First of all, do you think there's any chance whatsoever Trump pardons Assange?
So I am the national organizer for Action for Assange. I'm an activist in this movement. If I didn't maintain a little like nougat center of hope that was, surrounded by a nearly impassable wall of cynicism, I wouldn't be doing this. And I certainly wouldn't be effective at it.
I understand.
And we are effective at it, and I'm still doing this. So I do. There's every incentive in the world for Trump to pardon Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. For Trump, there are no negative consequences to pardoning Julian Assange. There's going to be press blowback, probably. But even that's kind of limited given the precedent that extraditing him and imprisoning him sets. So the press can sort of roast him for it, but this would be one of the pardons that they can't criticize. His political enemies will, and his political enemies have no love for Julian Assange. Joe Biden called him a high-tech terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
Hillary Clinton wanted to drone strike him.
Right.
And the room laughed.
But here's the thing, though. Yeah. No, I mean, that clip's absolutely disgusting. That was one of our...
I don't know. This today, pardoning several war criminals, pardoning the people who murdered innocent Iraqi civilians, juxtaposed to the gentleman who exposed those war crimes and the murdering of innocent Iraqi civilians. If your first move is to pardon the war criminals and not the nonviolent human being who exposed them, it doesn't bode well. It doesn't send a good message to all of us, in the Assange community.
Well, here's the problem, too. I mean, you're talking like a lot of his political enemies don't like Assange, which is totally true. Another thing that's also totally true is a lot of his political friends have no love for Assange either.
100%.
Now, some claim they do. I mean, Sarah Palin made a video recently. I'm glad she did it. Me
too. I was just on Jason Burmis talking about that earlier. I've never seen Sarah Palin humble.
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't the most insightful on the entire issue. Like, it sounded like she was just making it up as she went along. But she said it, and I'll take it. And if more politicians like her did that, where Trump will see it, that can't be a bad thing. I mean, even when the pastor, why do you think that thing happened with the pastor, where the pastor tweeted he's going to pardon Assange and then retracted it like an hour or so later? Why do you think that happened?
Okay, so the day before that, it was a huge Stop the Steal event in D.C., and that pastor opened up one of the rallies. Andrew Smith, my partner at Action for Assange, was there with a megaphone, not only heckling the pastor, but flipping that.
Oh, geez, we just lost Steve.
Had the
so wait, Steve, he was flipping what? We lost.
He was flipping the crowd. He flipped that rally into a Free Julian Assange event.
Oh wow!
For like 15 minutes, the whole crowd was chanting "Free Julian Assange."
Man. So the pastor heard that.
So the pastor heard that, but there were also a series. There were also like rumblings throughout Trump land. And I know this because I got to talk to Bill Binney a couple of times last week. Bill Binney, NSA whistleblower, an incredible human being. And also very much in the Trump camp. And he was saying like, well, I'm hearing from my sources that there's going to be, he said, I believe there's going to be a pardon, and I'm hearing there's going to be. I tend to think that's hopium. I tend to think that's just some feel-good stuff, but it's definitely been put to all of the people in Trump's sphere that this needs to happen.
So, I mean, that's awesome, man. Like, that's like the pastor heard people for Julian Assange, because I mean, when he tweeted that, I mean, I said, I think everyone proceeded with caution, but I think a lot of people engaged with it because it's like, okay, this is a good thing. They say about Trump that, I mean, it was Howard Stern, I think, who said it, where he's like, look, at the end of the day, Trump just wants to be liked. So let's tweet about how awesome that would be if he did that. It can't hurt. It can't hurt. And, you know, why do you think he retracted it so quickly then? So maybe that's why he did it. Why did he retract it? Was it because someone more powerful probably said, hey, that's not going to happen?
I'm sure he got a phone call. I'm sure somebody talked to him and was like, we're not co-signing that. I guess if you can call it wisdom, the conventional wisdom around this is that if Trump does pardon Julian and Ed, it's going to be like last possible minute on the way out the door thing. But again, I do think that's more hopium. I do think that's just stringing people along so that they keep paying attention or that particular blue check. You know what I mean? Like that pastor is connected to a community, and the Q community has just been so detrimental to the Assange movement that it's hard to take too much of what comes out of that guy's mouth even remotely serious. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. We lost you for a little bit there. We lost some of that, unfortunately. But so what is coming up on January 4th? Kind of just unpack that for everybody.
So District Judge Vanessa Baratzer, who we've been calling the concierge to the U.S. State Department, will read her decision as to whether or not Julian Assange is extraordinarily renditioned to the United States. There were two sets of hearings. One was evidentiary in February. One was witness testimony that started September 7th and went a couple of days into October. It was absolutely incredible. There were mind-blowing revelations. And if it would have been broadcast, maybe more people would have heard about it. But as it was, there was a cloud video feed. Nobody could attend court in person, or very limited in-person court procedure. Not very many journalists got on the cloud video feed. We've spoken to all of them on the Assange vigil. Some Kevin Gostola kept popping in because we were live streaming it during the morning when the hearing was taking place.
And he was out there, wasn't he? Like
he was in Chicago. He didn't get out he went out in February, but he did not get to go out in September. So he was stateside, waking up as early as we were, and was like, "Oh, you idiots are up. I'll come hang out." Yeah, yeah, for sure. It was fantastic. There was some Kevin Gostola is funny. That dude is funny.
He's a great. I mean, I like his writing a lot. I mean, yeah, I've been following that guy for a long time. Well, so what? I mean, and to just maybe state the obvious, if there are people who are a little less familiar with everything, if he gets extradited to the United States, I mean, what? We're not going to know anything.
No, we're not, because espionage court takes place in a vacuum. This there are people who think, well, you know, if Julian Assange was brought here, he could have his day in court, and he could.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, the idea that that is a level of naivety that I think borders on, like, I mean, I don't know. Profound ignorance, I think, is putting it gently. Yeah. Where it's like, I mean, I would say it veers on straight up nationalism.
Yeah.
To not see. Yeah. It is dangerous. I mean, it's like to have that much of a blinder on when it comes to the faults of your country. And to even think that knowing what they're trying to charge this guy for, knowing how bogus these charges are. I mean, calling them bogus. There's not a word in the English language for how ridiculous these charges are. And to think he would get a fair trial where it's completely out of the public's eye, completely. I mean, I don't.
It gets worse than that, though. It does, because the Eastern District of Virginia, where this courtroom is, where they call it espionage court, it's got a 100% conviction rate, Ron. Yeah. The jury pool is all from the towns where all of the intelligence community employees live. So if you're not directly related to, married to someone in the intelligence community, you know them, they're your friends and neighbors, and you're their kid's baseball coach. Not only that, there is no public interest defense allowed for the Espionage Act. Under Espionage Act charges, 17 of the charges against Assange are under the Espionage Act of 1917, which was originally intended to be a political weapon to curb speech in the first place. And here it is in its penultimate form, in that it's now going after a journalist and publisher. First time in history this has ever been done.
Yeah.
No public interest defense when, because it's a national security case, there's going to be a ton of words that are going to be redacted from the transcript and replaced with nonsense words. It confuses the jury and makes them think that whatever's being said is so evil and so fundamentally dangerous that they're not allowed to read this word or this phrase. John Kiriakou, who went through espionage court and did 30 months in prison for revealing the U.S. torture program, is the gentleman who's explained all of this to me and explained it to the Slow News Day audience and the Free Assange Vigil audience. So it's not like I'm just, pulling this out of anywhere. A guy who lived it broke it down for me. Go ahead.
On January 4th, then, is it going to be like, are they making the solid decision to, or are they going to rule on extraditing him? If they do rule that way, I mean, what could potentially happen next?
So if they rule in favor of extradition, which, let's be honest, absolutely nothing about this process has been fair or legal to begin with, including the fact that Julian's been denied lawyer-client confidentiality since 2017. If they do rule in favor of extradition, there is an appeals process, but the UK criminal justice system, that determination is by the court whether or not to even accept it. So the legal team will, either way, extradition or no extradition, an appeal will be made. The court and a panel of magistrates then decides whether or not to hear it, if it has legal merit, which it will. But again, we're literal kangaroos would make up a more impartial court. So if appeals gets approved, then it moves into another court where Julian's legal team does feel more confident. But according to Stella Morris, his partner and the mother of his two young children, Max and Gabriel, according to her, what she's hearing from UK, legal beagles is they would like to accelerate the appeals process. Stella is telling us be prepared for them to try to move him by May.
Okay. So
normally it would take 2 to 5 years. She's saying it's going to take 2 to maybe 5 months.
So to just summarize here a little bit, because you cut out like a little bit here and there. So to just make sure we got it all. So if they rule for extradition on January 4th, they can appeal it. And who decides whether that appeal holds water or not? Well, the courts themselves decide. So if they decide, yes, we'll hear this appeal, it goes to another court that they do feel a little better about. But meanwhile, simultaneously, they're going to try to make this process as speedy as possible to try to get him to the United States.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
and I need to point this out. The 18th charge that Julian has is a conspiracy to commit computer intrusion charge. What that does is criminalize source protection for journalists, which is rule number 1 and tenet number 1 and holy writ number 1 for journalists: protect your source.
Right.
So it was proven in multiple courts now that Julian Assange did not in any way, shape, or form engage in trying to help Chelsea Manning break into any computer in order to get Cablegate or the war logs or collateral murder. It came out in open court that she didn't even have to have a username or password to access all of that material, that everyone in her rank had access to that out of the 100,000 other soldiers that had her rank, she was the only one who saw that and went, this is a problem.
And they tortured her to try to get her to say otherwise.
Yep.
They tortured her. I mean, that's why they're still tormenting her. They are still tormenting her because they desperately want her to say that Julian Assange helped her hack. Somehow he's super hacker Magoo, apparently, and he helped her hack, because that's technically a crime. The way U.S. law works, just accepting the information, that's not a crime. But if you actually hacked, well, the hacking itself is a crime. So if you participated in that, then you committed a crime. And you can find segments on NPR where Glenn Greenwald had to explain this to other journalists. He had to explain this to an NPR so-called journalist. And, you're talking about all the things this whole Assange case connects to. And yeah, there are many connections. The connection to the importance of a free and open internet and city-owned internet, municipal broadband, to assure that that stays the lay of the land. The importance of communication for activism. It also goes to show why the U.S. media structure should straight up be illegal. There should be laws against it, because their complicity in all this. And when I say laws, I don't mean laws against freedom of speech or freedom of expression. I mean laws like, hey, you're not news and information if you have oil and gas advertising on your network. You're not news and information. That's against the law in Norway. There's other countries where what our country does with news and information would be against the law, and those countries don't have less freedom of speech. They have more. You look at the actual press freedom index, because freedom of the press doesn't just mean, you know, some goofball like Chris Hayes can say whatever he wants or anyone else. Freedom of the press also means the ability of people to have quality information and the ability of people to not be propagandized and to know what they're reading and to know what they're seeing. That's what freedom of the press also refers to. People try to forget that part. Yeah. So, you know, places like Norway and countries that actually have laws prohibiting media structures like ours, they have more press freedom, not less, because they realize that you don't have a free press if you just hand it over to corporate interests. That's the opposite of a free press. They know that. We don't get that. The United States doesn't get that. Well, Steve, again, man, thank you so much for doing what you do. The way you guys have really kept this story going. And it's been a worldwide effort of so many people on different levels. And it's really inspiring, and it's infinitely important. And you know what? I mean, and I know, you know, we're both sarcastic, cynical dudes in many ways, but I think that it is working. I mean, more people are in tune to this than there were at the beginning of the year.
I agree.
And more people are sounding the alarm about this than there were before. And, you know, just the fact that, you know, you got this in front of a president. And yeah, Trump's a goofball, and you know, the next guy is going to be a goofball too. And goofball is putting it quite gently to describe both of them. But I'm in the holiday spirit. But you got it in front of a president, more or less.
Yeah,
that's huge, and you know, it's infinitely important. This is the press freedom story of a generation. This just is, and really hope that it will have a just ending where this man will be free and back with his family. And you really hope that history tells it the right way too. And you hope that, because what's really important here is, first and foremost, of course, getting Julian free. But then after that, trying to do everything in our power as a society to make sure something like this never happens again.
Absolutely. And we actually have a project called the First Freedoms Society that we're getting ready to launch that encapsulates all of this and whatever the next step is. Targeted campaigns, reform the Espionage Act, reintroduction of the legislation that Tulsi Gabbard put forward.
To pardon Assange.
To pardon Snowden, and to reform the Espionage Act to add those whistleblower protections. A number of different things. We're building a website that'll be an aggregate of censored media, censored content creators, because the push to fight for internet censorship is more important than ever, and we want to be at the forefront of that in our own way. You know, as effective as we can be. This is it. I mean, this is it. The time is right now. And if you're planning on being in DC for the Force the Vote event, please come see us up the street at the Department of Justice afterwards. We need you on the ground with us, but more importantly, as important, we need you talking about it. Wherever you are, social media, the grocery store, I don't care. You know, you need to help us be the voice for press freedom, not just in this country, but globally.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your